Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Iowa as Republican lawmakers in this state now push new bills curbing powers vested in the governor's office after Kim Reynolds, the Republican governor's term, is set to expire at January of next year, as these Republican lawmakers now declare that they are going to be absorbing power from the governor's mansion in a move that reveals the hand of the state party as they look ahead to the 2026 midterm elections. For a bit of context, the state of Iowa is a state that Donald Trump won in the last election by roughly 13 points. For most purposes, there would never be any consideration or question about whether or not this state would vote for the Republicans come November of this year. They have an incumbent in office who is, unpopular, but not to the degree that it dooms any Republican running in the race. And they have a long list of Republicans running for this office, including an incumbent U.S. representative from Iowa's 4th District. But the Republicans seem to be scared enough that they are now changing the laws surrounding the abilities of the governor in this state. They would never want to strip their own party of extensive political power that is again afforded to the governor's office. So the only reason that Republicans try to do this is in anticipation of what could be a Democratic Party victory. Now, it is a state that Donald Trump won by roughly 13 points, but Republicans probably remember that it wasn't too long ago that Donald Trump also won Iowa by roughly a similar amount, roughly 10 points in the 2016 presidential election. But just 2 years later, the Democrats would go on to get Iowa down to a margin of less than 3 points across the state, and it jeopardized the Republicans who had the incumbency factor in this race, because Fred Hubbell put up a good fight against Kim Reynolds in this race, marking the closest competition for Democrats where they lost a governor's race in quite some time in the state of Iowa, as well as in a lot of states that Donald Trump had won in 2016, 2020, and also 2024. The Republicans see that there is an immense opportunity for Democrats in the governor's race because of Democratic candidate Rob Sand, who, despite the Republicans winning the governor's office in Iowa in 2018, that when it came down to the statewide election, when it came let's go ahead over here to state auditor, defeated a Republican incumbent by roughly 5 points. Fast forward to 4 years later, the Democrats would do it again with Rob Sand, who came into the state auditor race and ended up winning in 2022 by a very narrow margin, despite Iowa on the governor's level in 2022, voting for the Republicans by over 18 points. The reason why Republicans are limiting the power of the governor's office is because they believe that Rob Sand could very much win this race. They are preemptively stripping away the power from an office that voters have yet to decide on, because their expectation in this race is that Rob Sand might actually be the only Democrat who can be successful in this race. And so far, he's outraising the Republicans, outperforming the Republicans, and Iowa, amongst many other states in the country, are one of the states that have been impacted by Donald Trump's tariffs and economic decisions to the highest degree. That is something that can be a motivational factor in its own right that benefits Democrats tremendously, because voters are so fed up and angry with existing Republican leadership. And getting back to this point again about Iowa, this playbook from Republicans in deciding to strip political power from offices that they expect to lose is actually not that different than what we've seen in the first time there was a Democratic wave in 2018. The state of Wisconsin did the exact same thing. Republicans stripped away the political powers of the Democrats, prepped the bills right before the election. It confirmed their suspicions, passed it right after the election, and the Republican governor signed into law additional pieces of legislation that stripped his own power and what would be the Democratic governor's power in this state. Essentially, the Republicans used their supermajority that they only had through a means of gerrymandering the state into oblivion and stripped away the Democratic governor, who was duly elected by his citizens, by the citizens in this state, and they made it so that Democratic governor would have significantly less control. But in the lead up to that election, These bills were proposed and were a big piece of conversation at that time that indicated that Wisconsin Republicans likewise were reading the writing on the wall. Scott Walker, who was going for a third term, was expecting to win this race, but many Republicans in Washington, D.C., and in the state capitol and across Wisconsin likewise knew together that Scott Walker would not be winning re-election. The North Carolina Republicans did the same exact thing most recently in 2024. They stripped power away from the governor's office and the attorney general's office, again with pieces of legislation that they had built up before the election and ended up implementing after that November cycle, after Democrats actually won those races. North Carolina's governor's race went blue, the attorney general's race went blue, and believe it or not, an interesting nugget of electoral history is that Republicans haven't held the attorney general's office in North Carolina since 1896. There has not been a single time in the 20th or 21st century that Republicans in North Carolina have held the attorney general's office, which is just so fascinating to me. But the point is that the Republican Party in this state, existing under Democratic leadership, realized that this cycle probably wasn't going to end. If Josh Stein, who won by 15 in 2024, and Jeff Jackson, who won by a considerable amount, given that it was a Trump state, those victories are ones that Republicans realized meant that their political careers probably weren't going to end just after 2024. And so they stripped the power of these elected officials because they were worried about what they might be able to do in reaction to the GOP with said political power. But getting back to Iowa, I actually think this is a bit of a unique circumstance, because the Iowa Republicans aren't necessarily waiting until November to act on this. They filed House Bill 2413 that says that any of these new major administrative rules that agencies are going to implement are ones that the state assembly have to sign off on. And, as much as the House leader is denying that this is in anticipation of a Democrat winning the general election, let's just be very clear about this. There is no reason that someone of their own party would be trying to strip their future governor under their party of any political power if they were confident that their party was going to win. It is different than Wisconsin and North Carolina in that those states did it after the election. But these Iowa Republicans are probably seeing something similar to what the Democrats are in this state, which is that there is immense opportunity for Democrats to do quite well in Iowa, and these elections that have been taking place in the state certainly have shown it. When you're taking a look at elections in Iowa, not just in 2026, but I actually want to go back to the 2025 elections in this state, where Republicans were facing off in a number of special elections in this state. When you take a look, great example, Iowa Senate District 35. This is a Senate district that Republicans won in 2022 with 60% of the vote. She became lieutenant governor in December of 2024, and it forced a special election. 8 days after, Trump was inaugurated as president. In those 8 days after, Democrats flipped this seat from Republican plus 20 to D plus 3. 4 points, actually. A 25 point swing from the 2024 presidential election. Donald Trump won this seat by 21, and it continued. In Iowa House District 100, a district that, voted for Trump in 2024, where the Republican defeated the independent candidate, who actually fares better than the Democrats here, with 68% of the vote. Blaine Watkins would be elected with just 52% of the vote, a 17-point difference from the last election. And it continued. When you look at election results like these, Iowa House District 78, a safe Democratic seat, Kamala Harris won 65% of the vote. Angel Ramirez, in an election 3 months after Trump is inaugurated, won 79% of the vote, a 14-point increase. As it continued, Iowa State Senate District 1, a district that previously was held by Republicans, flipped to the Democrats, ending the supermajority in the Iowa State Senate for the Republicans. And it just continued and continued even into 2026 when we think about elections we've already seen this year in the state of Iowa. When you go back and look at 2026, there have been races statewide. Not statewide, rather. There have been races that have mattered when it comes down to special elections. And those results and those elections have shown Democrats to improve in the districts. Now, the GOP is trying to strip away the governor of having political power, which means they are terrified. They are showing their hand, and they can deny it publicly or not, but from a very logical point of view, no reason to say you want to take away any power from any Republican governor in the state unless you believe the governor would not be a Republican come this November. Because Donald Trump might have won the state by roughly 13 points, but almost every special election in Iowa we have seen has seen over a 13-point swing. And that is something that just quite frankly cannot be ignored by the modern-day Republican Party, by Donald Trump and his advocates in the Oval Office, because if it is, this seat very seriously could turn blue. Because it almost did in 2018, the same year that Rob Sand won statewide by roughly 4 points against an incumbent Republican in this race, not to mention that Democrats won 75% of congressional representation and were 4 points off of 100% of congressional representation in the state of Iowa in 2018. Fast forward to right now, Iowa is certainly in play for the Democrats, and it is Republicans who are showing that they believe that is the case. So, where are we now? Keep your eyes peeled on Iowa. Let's closely watch this race, but as it stands right now, Republicans pushing this bill is the clearest indication that they are worried and running scared about what might happen in this state for the 2026 midterm elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 governor election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.